Hey guys, Rorius here. Welcome back to a one-off Get to Know Rorius video. Today we're doing another My Collection video. Hopefully I'm not messing this camera up too much. Last time we did a PS1 collection thing, and today I thought we'd do a little Get to Know Rorius PS2 collection edition. I'll do a few more of these like Get to Know Rorius videos every now and then, just in case you guys are interested in learning more about me and my things. So, straight away, in a separate video that I will link in the description, I will do a little catch-up as to what is changed with these PS1 games. But let's just jump straight into PS2 games. Okay, so, I think these are in alphabetical order. I did not actually check ahead of time. So, let's start off over here. First up, we've got a game that clearly we bought secondhand. Oh, before we even start, just a quick side note. The PS2 era, we were kind of more aware of games coming out, so, like, we were able to get almost everything we wanted. There's very few games that we weren't able to buy during the PS2 era, so I haven't really bought any PS2 games recently. These are all going to be old games that I played when they were relevant. So, this game is called Aggressive Inline. This is just a really interesting, it's like a Tony Hawk game, except instead of skateboards, you're on roller skates. And it's just genuinely a lot of fun. Genuinely a really cool, sporty, inline skating game. But we bought it secondhand because we probably didn't buy it when it first came out. You'll notice there's way fewer Platinum games that we own on PS2, because we were much more actively buying games on the PS2 era. And also, the Platinum thing was starting to die out a little bit during PS2 era. It still existed in PS3, but it was like so diminished that almost no games bothered to even go Platinum. You know, because people don't like having the separate boxes. Okay, so the Bouncer. This is I should show the discs. I should use the same format I used last time. So Aggressive Inline. Let's open the case. Yeah, manual, disc, all covered with pre-owned. So, The Bouncer. This was a really interesting game. It's made by Squaresoft, so the people who made Final Fantasy. The interesting part of it is that they made a completely different, separate IP, but with the same sort of style as the current, like, Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy XII era of Final Fantasy characters. And it's a fighting game. It's a game where you are either like one-on-one fighting like each other. You can do like versus modes. There's some of the characters. It's picking up the girl, second character in that list's face. Yeah, I think the third character in that list is the main character. And the girl that's being picked up, the second character in that list, is like the secondary main character. But anyway, yeah, this is just a really interesting fighting game, really weird story, but the characters had really interesting fighting moves, because they weren't like traditional style fighting moves, unlike Tekken, where every character has like you're either martial artist, or you're like a boxer. This game had really unique fighting styles. Yeah, just an interesting find, and it's pretty hard to get nowadays, so I'm glad we got it back in the day. Pretty sure it was secondhand when we bought it, but whatever. Yeah, Kane Canis Edit. Canis Canem Edit. This is known as Bully in the US, I think in the US. I bought this myself. This is one of those early games that I bought. I had just turned 13 when I bought this. That dates this game quite a bit. This must have come out shortly before 2007 or 2000, yeah, like around 2007. Yeah. One of the PS2's finest action games. Yeah, this is a really interesting game. Basically Grand Theft Auto, but you're a kid. Did I open Bouncer's case? I don't remember. Yeah. Basically Grand Theft Auto, except you're a kid at a boarding school, and after you get through the boarding school section, you're basically out on the town. You still live at the boarding school, I think, but the whole game like opens up and you're in this like town area, and you like roam around and do stuff with girlfriends and stuff like that. Yeah. I never really got to that part of the game. I only ever played in the school. Just in case I didn't show the Bouncer case, I'll open it up. Yeah, we did get it pre-owned. I thought we did. We must have taken off all the stickers on the outside. Some of the cases used to come with a memory card slot, which is actually useful. I used that a bunch when I was taking games to friends' houses and stuff. But yep, we gotta have all the stuff in there. Now the next one in this alphabetical list is Crash Wrath of Cortex. We got this after it was already platinum, mainly because I believe we played a demo of it early on, and both my brother and I decided that we were not really into this new era of Crash Bandicoot. The cutscenes and the characterizations were just poorer, were just not as well done as Crash Bandicoot 3. And this is basically Crash Bandicoot 3 2. It's the same game, except not like with less polish. The characters were like kind of hideous. Like the PS1 era characters were low poly. This had like way better opportunity to be better graphics, but nope. Considerably worse quality. I will play this on the channel eventually, just because I still like it. It's still like an okay Crash game. Wait, did I open the case? I'm opening the cases as well to check that I have all the discs in the right places. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, this is one we actually bought. We didn't get it secondhand. But we waited until it was platinum to get it. But yeah, I consider that not as good as Crash to Insanity. We've played this on the channel very recently. In fact, an episode of this came out the day before yesterday, and there's going to be an episode tomorrow where we're playing this, but in a different form. Yeah, we got this. This is a later form platinum game where they started to have this like platinum logo down the bottom here. Basically, yeah, Crash to Insanity, significantly better in my opinion than Wrath of Cortex, even though it's got even less polish and it was more rushed. It was just a better game, better planning, better design stuff. The models actually weren't half bad. Characterization, so much better. The only thing with this is, of course, we didn't buy this straight away because we were so put off by Wrath of Cortex that we basically didn't buy any PS2 Crash until someone suggested this. Someone was like, oh, you should give it a try. And we gave it a try, and we were like, oh, actually, this is cool. This is actually really funny and cool. So anyway... Wait, did I open it? Let's open it. Because I actually have put the disc back in, yeah. Yeah, Platinum, PS2, Crash to Insanity. And this is the PAL cover. Apparently the NTSC cover has like 2D characters, whereas the PAL one has like 3D style characters. Alright, here's a cool game. Here's a game that I loved. Oh, that's right, I forgot that I don't actually have the disc copy of it. The game that came before this one. So, this is Dark Chronicle. I love this game. This is an old JRPG game. It's basically... Oh, how the hell do I describe it? The only way I can describe it is the same way as... It would just be more confusing if I said it's basically just Dark Cloud, but Dark Cloud 2. In fact, in the US, it's called Dark Cloud 2. Even though it's not directly related in any way. Just gameplay-wise, they are almost identical, but in story-wise, they're completely unrelated. Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicle... Dark Cloud I love as well. Dark Cloud and Dark Chronicle are both games I adore. I have Dark Cloud on PS4. I have a PS2 remake or re-release on PS4, so I do have a copy of it that I have access to. But in terms of the disc, this is the only one I have. Yeah, Dark Chronicle, it's hard to describe because it's got so much stuff in it. It's one of those games that's like, it's probably like 60 to 80 hours of gameplay, at least. It's got dungeon crawling, active action, unlike a lot of JRPGs which are turn-based. This is like, you fight real time. You've got like levels of dungeons. And then it also has just a bunch of bonus stuff. Like you can go, there's like this golf game you can play while in the dungeons. It's called Spheda. Then you can go fishing in areas, and the main premise of the game is that you're actually rebuilding areas of the world. A time bad guy, I was going to call him a time wizard, but just a bad guy who's using time travel, is going back in time and like deleting parts of the world. And so basically you're using your time powers, because you've got this like special this necklace. This red necklace, and Monica eventually, I think she has a blue armband, that's right. This necklace and armband allow them to travel forward and backward in time. The girl, I think her name's Monica, she's from the future, and Max, the main character, is from the past, and they use their bracelets. And basically Max's bracelet allows them to go forward in time, and her bracelet allows her to go backwards in time. And so they use their powers together to save the world. The rebuilding stuff and the like way you unlock stuff and the way you level up is just really unique and interesting. This is one of those games like Tombi or like Abe's Odyssey that informed my interest in like making games. I would like to make a game like Dark Chronicle, but it's such a big game that it would be like a later stage game that I made. Next up, we've got Destroy All Humans. I loved this game a lot as a kid. I like playing games where you play as the bad guy. Yeah, Destroy All Humans, you play as the alien invading Earth, and the title Destroy All Humans is a misnomer, really, because that's not really your aim, even though they say it a few times in the game as well. It's not really your aim. Your aim is to harvest the humans. One giant step on mankind. It's just really stylized. The remake did a pretty good job of recreating it. I played the remake on the channel if you'd like to check it out. No manual! Why is there no manual? The manual was great. I remember reading the manual of this game specifically on the way home after buying it. I convinced my mum to buy this for me at the time. This is a game that I liked, my brother didn't really like it. But I followed that up shortly after with Destroy All Humans 2, which, stylistically speaking, still really good, not as good as the first game. They went for the 60s instead of the 50s, and the 60s don't suit Alien Invasion quite as much, but a lot of the choices, a lot of the styles, a lot of the like weapon upgrades, the new weapons you got, just really cool. Although it did lack differentiation in some ways, because a lot of it was basically Destroy All Humans 1 again, and some of the mission stuff was less polished. Like, Destroy All Humans 1 was very much, like, heavily mission-focused. Destroy All Humans 2, its missions felt a little more, how would I describe it? They felt a little bit more... If you've ever played an MMO, and, like, you go up to a character because they have an exclamation mark over the head, and then they tell you a mission to do, and then you do the mission. That's kind of what the missions were like, a little bit. Many of the missions in Destroy Humans 2 were like that. And it just didn't make for as interesting a story game as the first game did. So, yeah. Anyway, next up we've got Devil May Cry. This is a game that my brother bought, of course. I didn't know what the hell this was when we first got it. But, I think we actually... No, the story I'm telling here is more of actually the story of Devil May Cry 2. I think we got Devil May Cry 1 after 2. 2 apparently is the least favorite game of people. Like, when people talk about Devil May Cry, people don't say that their favorite is Devil May Cry 2. But I love Devil May Cry 2, actually. Because, you can play as Dante himself, or you can play as Lucia? You play as, like, a female character. I really liked the upgrade system in this. Basically, you get this, like, these orbs that modify your demon abilities. And when you attach certain orbs, you suddenly get the ability to either, like, double jump, or you, get, like, super speed, or, like, the special upgrades. Basically, yeah, the gameplay. I really like the gameplay. I had no idea what was going on in this game. But Devil May Cry 1, interesting story. Devil May Cry 1 was originally going to be Resident Evil 4. Capcom, the developers of Resident Evil, were like, okay, after 3, they were like, we need to redo the series. We need to make a new thing. Like, that's their style. That's what Capcom always does. They're like, we need to reinvent Resident Evil, because people have got sick of what we've done with the previous ones. And then, the developer, like, originally came up with this idea, and the heads at Capcom decided Devil May Cry, what they were making, I think we got this secondhand, what they were making was just too different from the Resident Evils from before, because it was just too separated. So they, instead of canning it, like a lot of developers would do, Capcom saw the potential of it, and were like, okay, let's make a whole new series. And they kept developing it, and they made Devil May Cry. And another team at Capcom ended up making Resident Evil 4, and Resident Evil 4 was great. So even though Resident Evil 4 didn't turn out, this turned into Devil May Cry, Resident Evil 4 still was really well made. So it's a positive story all around. And of course we got Devil May Cry 3. Devil May Cry 3 is probably considered the better of the 3 first games. Although I think people like 1 over 2. Devil May Cry 3 was, like, brutally hard. I don't think I ever finished it. I think I got to the last boss and I couldn't beat him. Or I could only beat him on easy or something like that. Yeah. But yeah, I remember my friend Jeremy and I we both played this, and we were sort of we discussed a lot of this game. I think he was able to beat it, and I was always like, no, because I couldn't beat the last boss on the normal difficulty or higher. Next up, we got Dirge of Cerberus, which is a Final Fantasy VII spin-off. I never really played this. This was my brother's game. This was basically you play... It's weird that I didn't really play it, because this is kind of like... I probably would have enjoyed this. It's basically like a spin-off game where you're running around. It's basically Vincent the spin-off. The character Vincent from Final Fantasy VII, the guy in the front cover, he's a vampire of some sort. I don't know if he's actually a vampire, but I always thought of him as being a vampire. He has, like, guns, and I think... Does he have a blade? He has mostly guns, I think. And this game is basically like a third-person shooter where you play as Vincent, shooting bad guys, shooting monsters from the Final Fantasy games. Yeah, really interesting game. But I never really played it, so I don't really know what else to say. It's once again one of my brother's games, another JRPG, Dragon Quest. Which version is this? Dragon Quest: The Journey of the Cursed King. It might have a number, but it's Journey of the Cursed King. Yeah, basically, my brother found out about the Dragon Quest games, and he decided to play this one, and he really liked it. He really likes the Dragon Quest games now, I think. But basically, interesting random fact, this is one of the earlier Square Enix games. Squaresoft, who made The Bouncer, we just looked at before, and did they make... Yeah, no, actually, Dirge of Cerberus was also Square Enix. Basically, at some point, between when The Bouncer was released, that says Squaresoft, and those games, the company Squaresoft and the company, I think, were they just called Enix? The two big studios in Japan merged, and they became Square Enix. And so Dragon Quest and, like, Final Fantasy games there, are now, like, made by the same developers. They're Square Enix now. This is a really weird game. This is called Extermination. We got it pre-owned because we could never find it normally in store. We had a demo, I think, for this game, and it's really kind of gross. It's kind of like a gross, like, it's like Resident Evil. I wouldn't be surprised if it either started out as a Resident Evil. It's not made by Capcom. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if it started out as like a Resident Evil clone, because it involves... Oh, that cover is awful to look at in the camera. Basically, it's like a Resident Evil game, but instead of viruses like they were at the time, this was dealing with some sort of like parasite that morphed your body, like these weird leeches that would like transform your body, and there was like an infection system, I think, in this game, and like shortly after or around the same time, Resident Evil 4 came out, and that was the first of the Resident Evil games to involve parasites instead of viruses. So either this came as a clone of Resident Evil 4, or it came out beforehand, and Resident Evil 4 was, like, kind of the same game in many ways. In many ways, it was very much not. This was based in, like a modern-day facility, whereas Resident Evil 4 is set in, like, a village in the middle of nowhere. Anyway, Final Fantasy X. This game, oh my god. This is one of the first PS2 games we ever played. I think our PS2 came with this. When we bought it, it actually came with Final Fantasy X. I think we originally hired a PS2 from our video store, and it came with Final Fantasy X. Like, we hired Final Fantasy X with it, as well as Jak and Daxter. These are the two games that we had with the PS2. These are the very first PS2 games we ever played. Final Fantasy X, of course, being a sequel of the earlier Final Fantasy games, which we were already a fan of, and Jak and Daxter, the modern-day Crash Bandicoot by Naughty Dog. Modern at the time, I mean. I loved Jak and Daxter. I really wanted to get Jak and Daxter with the PlayStation. My brother really loved Final Fantasy X. We both loved Final Fantasy X, to be fair. So that's why when we ended up getting a PS2, this was the first game we got. We actually didn't get Jak and Daxter for a long time, hence Platinum. But back to Final Fantasy X. I'll come back to Jak and Daxter. Final Fantasy X. This was the first Final Fantasy game to feature voice acting, and I remember when I first played it, the intro cutscene of this game shows off all the characters all the main characters of the game. It shows off all your party members that you can get. It shows them, there's no dialogue for a bit, and then the main character walks up a hill and looks out over, like, the destroyed Zanarkand, which you don't know what it is at the time, of course, but the destroyed Zanarkand. That line that he says, I can't actually remember it now. I feel bad, I was, like, about to recite it, but I just realized I can't remember it exactly. Something along the lines of Titus says, "This is my story. I don't know how long I have," or something like, "I don't know how much time I have to tell it," or "I don't know if I'll have another chance to tell it." And when I heard those lines, I think I cried because I was so, like, blown away. This is the first Final Fantasy game with voice acting, and I fucking loved this game. I still do. And I'm always annoyed when people shit on it, because a lot of people make fun of some of the moments in the game, because it is kind of cringy in a few moments. The most notorious one is the laughing scene, where Tidus and Yuna are laughing. I feel like people make fun of it because they don't actually know, they don't realize what the significance of the scene is. People just see it as like the most cringy moment, and yes, it is. It's definitely the most cringy moment in the whole game. But it's intentional. It's intentionally cringy. People think of it as being like, it's an example of how bad the writing is or something in this game. The writing isn't the best. It's Final Fantasy, you know. it's Japanese translated to English, so of course it's not going to be the best. That whole scene, the whole point of that scene... Oh, I don't think I opened it. The whole point of that scene is that the people are sad, your characters are sad, and Yuna says that the way she makes herself feel better is she pretends to laugh until she feels happy again. And so the characters are literally pretending to laugh, and it's awkward and horrible, but because it's so awkward and so ridiculous, at the end of that scene, they crack up and they laugh, and they're, you know, briefly happy. Everyone in this game is fucking miserable most of the time. So they actually, at the end of that scene, you hear, like, genuine laughter at the end. And that scene, I actually really like that scene, at the end of that scene. So it's really sad when I just see people mocking it, for being, like, this cringy as fuck moment. And yes, it is, I will reiterate, it is fucking cringy. It doesn't, all the fake laughing. But, yeah. At least put it in context, for God's sake. Anyway, okay. So, Final Fantasy X-2. I didn't really like this game very much. I felt like it was just, like, fan-servicey pandering. So this just didn't do anything for me. It was all, like, all the people who were, like, thirsting after, like, Yuna and the other female characters, like Riku. This game was basically fan service for them. Lots of, like, butts and boobs. As well as the fighting style, apparently, the gameplay is apparently really fun, but I just couldn't get into it narratively speaking. I tried it a few times and I just couldn't get into it. Then, Final Fantasy XII. I've heard this is a great game. My brother loves this game. Many Final Fantasy fans think Final Fantasy XII is a great game. I never got into it for some reason. I guess after 10, I kind of stopped playing Final Fantasy games mostly. Yeah, I've heard good things. Fans of Final Fantasy love this game. I've never really played it. I played it once or twice and just couldn't get into it. Next up, we've got God of War. Now, this is a game, as you can see, since it's Platinum, I didn't get into it initially, straight away, but a friend of mine loved this game and recommended it to me a bunch. I then found out shortly afterwards that it's actually made by the same guys who make Twisted Metal, which I freaking loved Twisted Metal Black, which we'll get to eventually. Yeah, God of War. What a great series. You probably know plenty about it because of the modern God of War. This is the very first game in the series, and it's a lot of fun. It's so good. It was good from the very first game. God of War 2, of course. I bought this more at the time that it actually came out. I think I bought these around the same time. I did play them in order, I believe, but I bought God of War a little after it came out, and then God of War 2 sort of as it was coming out. Once again, played it underaged. Once again, this God of War 2, it's just more God of War. It was just a more polished, better version of the original game. They did a great job following it up. And apparently after God of War 2, God of War 3 and onwards were not made by the same people who made Twisted Metal, so I sort of was... Some of my interest in it was lost. I bought God of War 3, but I haven't played God of War since God of War 3. Anyway, Grand Theft Auto 3. Now, once again, did not play this of age. My brother didn't play this of age, I don't even think. But he was close, you know, he would have been like 17 when he first played it. But God of War 3. Sorry, Grand Theft Auto 3. What an excellent game. It is taking the Grand Theft Auto games, which we'd already played. We'd played Grand Theft Auto 1 on PC. And then Grand Theft Auto 3 turned that game into a 3D game. And you were running around in person in the city. With a third-person camera. And yeah, what a great game. I don't think I opened up the God of War 2 case, but it's fine. Although I do want to open them up because I want to check that the discs are in there. Now, we're going to jump around a bit because the next game on the list is Grand Theft Auto Liberty City Stories. This game came out significantly later than Grand Theft Auto 3, but it is like a direct sequel, or prequel, I think, actually, to Grand Theft Auto 3. So, I have it listed, like, right after Grand Theft Auto 3. It's basically, like, the spin-off. Grand Theft Auto 3, the spin-off, where you play as one of the characters. Like, you originally played as a mute guy named... Oh, it's a French name. I don't remember who you play as in 3. Your character's mute for some reason, but in Liberty City Stories, you play as like a character. You play as like a side character who has a voice line. But I wanted to jump straight over to here. Vice City, Grand Theft Auto Vice City. This was the game. This was the game. People always give Grand Theft Auto 3 all the credit for bringing Grand Theft Auto into the modern era. I would argue that this is a significantly better game. Grand Theft Auto Vice City took what Grand Theft Auto 3 set up and just knocked all the pins off of the... ticked all the boxes, if you will. Knocked all the pins down. What a fucking great game. Vice City is, in my opinion, the best Grand Theft Auto game. It just has all the style, all the humor. Yeah, it's brilliant. Grand Theft Auto 3 had humor in it, don't get me wrong, but it just did not have nearly as good humor as Vice City. Now, we've got Vice City Stories. Once again, this came out after Liberty City Stories, and it's, once again, you play as a character who dies at the very beginning of Vice City. He literally dies in the intro cutscene of Grand Theft Auto Vice City, and you play the prequel. You play as him before he died, and his life. Because his life is apparently very interesting as well. I basically didn't play this game. Same with Liberty City Stories. Never really played them. I think my brother played them. But I loved Vice City. Now, I don't know where it is. I know for a fact that we used to have San Andreas. I don't know where it is, whether it's been lost, whether a friend of my brother's borrowed it, or if it's just in a box somewhere. All I know is that we don't have it here, but I loved San Andreas. San Andreas I played probably almost as much, if not more, than I did Vice City. And San Andreas, by the way, takes what Vice City did and expanded on it, and so it was just as good as Vice City, if not better. But Vice City is still my favorite. Now, we've got Gran Turismo 3, the follow-up to Gran Turismo 2, which is somewhere there. Once again, my brother played this. I never played this. I was not interested. My brother was a little bit interested in cars and car games. He liked some racing games. So, next up, we've got Hitman 2. We didn't actually play Hitman 2 first. We played Hitman Contracts first. Hitman Contracts is basically Hitman 3, but it's yes and no Hitman 3. It's picking up his face. It's hard to say because basically the way it works is these are the three. This is Hitman Blood Money. This game is great. This is definitely the best Hitman game, in my opinion. I haven't played the modern Hitman game, so I can't say for certain, but I would almost argue that Blood Money is probably better than the modern Hitman games. But, so, the way it works is that Hitman 1 didn't come out on PlayStation. I never really played it, but Hitman 1 set up the franchise. Hitman 2, apparently it nailed all the problems of Hitman 1 were sort of solved in Hitman 2. Apparently Hitman 2, most people think of as being the best game, or a lot of people think of as being the best game. I loved it. I played it a bunch. It was really fucking hard, but it was a great, great game with lots and lots of options to do stuff. Hitman Contracts came out as like a Lost Stories kind of game. The reason it's just called Contracts is that it's basically, there's not really an overarching story in Hitman Contracts, unlike Hitman 2 and Blood Money. Hitman Contracts, each mission takes place at a completely different time. Some of them before Hitman 2, some of them during Hitman 2, some of them like after Hitman 2. Basically, it's a mix mash of all sorts of missions that Agent 47 will have done or will do in the story. Then, Hitman Blood Money comes after these two, I think. But whatever the case, Hitman Blood Money, fucking excellent game. Took everything that Hitman 2 and Contracts did and just fucking nailed it. This is like this is basically like the magnum opus of the Hitman series, where everything came together and they did it perfectly. While Hitman 2 was really good, there was a lot of problems with it. There was a lot of weird, like, mechanics and choices and stuff. So yeah, it's I would consider it not as good as Hitman Blood Money. Oh, I should check all the cases. Check all the cases. So, do we have everything? So, we've got the disc there. Hitman 2. Silent Assassin is what its subtitle is. It doesn't show it on the disc for some reason. Hitman Contracts. This is the first game we played. I enjoyed Contracts a lot. It was really hard. Hitman Blood Money wasn't as hard, I don't think, but that's because it was just better, like, told. Like, it was better explained, and you understood. You could read the game better. I think that was the thing. Is like Hitman 2 and Contracts. Some of the missions they were a little hard to read because the game wouldn't like tell you things. Whereas Blood Money, it explained things better and did a better job of like leading the player to understand their world better. And so it's just a better game. Easier not in difficulty, but in like function. In its explanation and function. Next up, we've got Jak and Daxter. So yeah, we talked about Jak and Daxter before. It was the... I gotta switch hands. It was one of the first games. In fact, it was the first game I ever played, but not the first game we bought for PlayStation 2. If I open this up, let's have a look inside. Yeah, Jak and Daxter: The Precursor Legacy. Yeah, it's basically, as I said before, like Crash Bandicoot, but for PS2. Naughty Dog didn't own the Crash Bandicoot license because their publisher did. Universal Studios owned Crash Bandicoot. So when they went to PS2 and they wanted to move on to a new... When they went to PS2, they basically wanted to move on to a new franchise, one that they owned, so that they could put their... they could put their stamp on it and they could own it permanently. And that IP was Jak and Daxter. It started out so fun and fancy free, it started off so like for my generation, for like kids and slightly older. And then I had a lot of fun, by the way. I liked Jak and Daxter a lot. But then they released Jak 2. And as you can see from the labels and stuff, we didn't get this until way later. We got a secondhand, platinum and everything. The first one was platinum because we didn't have a PlayStation until like we didn't have a PlayStation until a little bit in, and even then we didn't buy Jak and Daxter straight away, so it went platinum before we bought it. Jak 2, on the other hand, I played this at a friend's house, and I was so disappointed that they had changed it from like the fun platformer to the like gritty shooter that I was just like so put off. Finally, Jak 2. People love Jak 2, but I just never got into it because it was the betrayal, It was like they went from this fun, fancy-free Jak 1 to Jak 2, Jak and Daxter to Jak 2. Yeah, they changed the name as well. It was Jak and Daxter, and then it became Jak 2 and Jak 3. And even though that I would call a game that, just because that's like a shorthand form, you could say Jak 1, Jak 2, and Jak 3. Yeah. I was so disappointed that I never played Jak 2 or 3. My brother played 3, though, a lot, and he really liked 3. And 3 looked a lot better than 2, in my opinion. I think people generally think 3 is the better game, but yeah, I never got into them. The format, for me, it was like a second-rate Ratchet and Clank. I already had a game that filled this genre, that's like the third-person shooter game, and I felt like Ratchet and Clank did a better job of it, so I was just never interested. Also, I forgot to open Jak 2. Let's see what it looks like on the inside. Yeah, Jak 2. Renegade. That's right, it has the subtitle Renegade. Yeah, no, I was not interested. Next up, we got a classic, Kingdom Hearts. We didn't know about Kingdom Hearts until it was already platinum, but once we learned about it, we fucking loved it. My brother and I fucking loved this game. It is... I think, in my opinion, Kingdom Hearts 1 was the best game in the series. They, did a really cool, unique idea, and then they just went off the rails. Kingdom Hearts 2 went full anime. Well, no, not quite. It almost went full anime. It, anime-ified the story so much that I struggled to get into the story of number 2. I still loved this game, and I still think it was tolerable in terms of, this anime-ness. But, the fact that this game started basically after a spin-off game... Yeah, the big problem I had with Kingdom Hearts wasn't so much I love the games. I love the gameplay. The Keyblade stuff. I didn't even mind the, corny Disney Final Fantasy crossover thing. Like I had no real issues with in the first game. It's like you're if you're ripped of your heart, the darkness claims your heart, you become a heartless. But then what happened is, in the interim between Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, they had spin-off games that they made that were on other consoles. So I couldn't play those other games because I only had PS1 and PS2. They made like Kingdom Hearts Chain of Memories for the GameCube or the DS or something. I don't remember. So I wasn't able to follow the series. And then Kingdom Hearts 2 starts off following that spin-off game, and it alludes to it. It's not a huge deal. You can play it without it, but like it alludes to it right at the start, and I was totally like, oh, "What the fuck is happening? What the fuck is going on? Why is my character in this situation?" Basically, from there, every new game came out on a new system. I wasn't able to follow the story. It got more and more anime, and I just lost interest. I haven't played any games since 2. I still want to play 3, though. I'm playing all the mainline series games. Alright. And what I should say as well is that Kingdom Hearts 1, just a side note, it really annoyed me that in Kingdom Hearts 1, the story was, if you were claimed by the darkness, or by the darkness, you became a Heartless. Your body would turn into a Heartless. And your heart would go up into the air, because you were heartless. But then, in Kingdom Hearts 2, they talk about how there's this new kind of enemy called the Nobodies. And the Nobodies are supposed to be the husks of a person without a heart. And then I'm like, well, what the fuck, what does that mean? The Heartless is already a person without a heart. Turns out, no. The Heartless are the heart that is consumed with darkness. So the Heartless is the heart. The Heartless is a heart, and the Nobodies are the Heartless. It's like, what the fuck? They went off, like, they just fucking... they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. Anyway, Legacy of Kane. This is the only Legacy of Kane game that I actually own in physical form. Basically, the story is, the Legacy of Kane Blood Omen 2, I hired that from the video store, fucking loved it, and we hired Soul Reaver 2. And I saw that Soul Reaver was on PlayStation 1, and I tried playing it, but we only had a demo of it. I couldn't find a copy of it. By the time I played Blood Omen 2, the PS2 was out, so PS1 stuff was dwindling rapidly. Legacy of Kane Defiance was the only game I could actually buy from the Legacy of Kane series. Blood Omen 2 and Soul Reaver 2 just didn't exist by the time I was trying to buy them. So the only one I could buy was Defiance, which is basically like the combo game where they both Kane from the Legacy of Kane Blood Omen games, as well as Raziel from the Soul Reaver games, are both in this game. Their stories are intertwined because Raziel basically is betrayed by Kane, and in the Kane stories, Kane is sort of like the leader of the vampires and trying to survive, trying to keep the vampire clans alive. Yeah, Raziel's betrayed by Kane, so they're enemies. In the Soul Reaver games, Kane is the bad guy. In the Legacy of Kane games, the humans who are like anti-vampire are the bad guys. Raziel was a vampire, betrayed by Kane and by the vampires, and he became a Soul Reaver because of what they did. And so they're linked. They're intrinsically linked. In fact, the sword that Kane uses is called... Oh, what's it actually? I think actually the sword is the thing that's called the Soul Reaver, isn't it? He's just Raziel's a Soul Collector. The sword is called the Soul Reaver, and Raziel's sword is a like spiritual form of the Soul Reaver. The spirit and they're basically like intertwined, these two characters. Even though they hate each other, they're intrinsically linked. I actually have the Soul Reaver as a sword. I have the real replica. Oh, like the real replica. It's a really shitty replica, but I have the Soul Reaver as a sword myself. Yeah, I would love to own Blood Omen 2 or Soul Reaver 2 or Soul Reaver 1 or Blood Omen 1. I actually have a poster for Blood Omen 1 that I found in... It wasn't even like... It was secondhand, but it wasn't even like a secondhand place. I bought it from a store called Mighty Ape that sells, like, first-hand things. But there was just this random framed poster, and I realized it was a Blood Omen 1 poster, and I was like, holy shit. It didn't have a price tag on it, so I took it to the front of the store and was like, how much does this cost? And the like person at the desk like looked it up, and they struggled to find any information about it, so they ended up just saying, oh, it's $15. And so I was like, fuck yeah, I'm buying that. I'm pretty sure if you were to buy a framed copy of that poster from a collector, well, I'm pretty sure I could sell it for like hundreds of dollars. Or at least like a lot more than I bought it for. Love the Legacy of Kane games, but I just never got to own any of the other ones. I think Blood Omen 2 and Soul Reaver 2 are significantly better than Defiance. Defiance is like a shittier version of both of those games, but it is both of those. It is like a version of both of those games, so at least it has some gameplay of both. But I really liked... I feel like Defiance follows the Soul Reaver style of leveling up more so than the Blood Omen, because in Soul Reaver you get like new elements and new swords and stuff as your main upgrades thing, but in and Defiance has that as well. But in Blood Omen 2, you actually got new abilities. Each time you killed a new vampire that was like a betrayer vampire, you'd get their powers, and so you'd get like some sort of special ability from them. Some vampiric ability. It was really cool. We got Medal of Honor Frontline. We got this mainly probably because we played Medal of Honor Underground. This is an earlier Medal of Honor game on PS2, and I never really played this. I was not interested. I very quickly decided from like Medal of Honor Underground and games on the PS1, I very quickly decided that I didn't really like military shooter games, like World War military shooter games, so I never really played them. But, okay, so, quick story. I should be pulling out Metal Gear Solid 2 first, but Metal Gear Solid 2, much like Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2, I remember specifically, was stolen by this one friend of my brother's. We had Metal Gear Solid 2 Substance, and Substance was like the special edition that had everything in it. It had all like the bonus content in it, and I was so mad that we lost it. We actually got a Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of the Patriots copy, but I don't even know where that is. Now that's missing as well. It's like multiple layers of missing discs. But whatever the case, we still have our Metal Gear Solid 3. We got the original Snake Eater. The Subsistence version of this came out a little afterwards, and my friend bought the Subsistence one. But because we'd already bought Snake Eater, we just didn't really... Like, we didn't want to buy another copy of Metal Gear Solid 3, so I never got to play the Subsistence version. Metal Gear Solid 2 and 3, love these games to death. 3, I think, is probably the best game in the series, especially in the PS2 era series. But I unapologetically love Metal Gear Solid 2. Most people hate 2 because of the Raiden thing, but I friggin' loved 2. I had no qualms with playing a character other than Snake, because that's what people were upset about, is that in the advertisements and stuff, you always saw Snake. You play as Snake in the very first mission of Metal Gear Solid 2, but then you never play as him again. You play as Raiden instead. And it was kind of a bait and switch on Kojima's part, and he apologized and like made fun of it later on, but I actually liked Raiden. I liked the story that they had. Metal Gear Solid 3, you play as Snake, but you actually play as a different version of Snake. You play as the original Snake, not the clone Snake. And Metal Gear Solid 3 is basically the origin story of all the rest of the Metal Gear Solid games. It is excellent. I sang the theme song of it because I love that song. I'm still in a dream, Snake Eater. Anyway, I fucking love that game a lot.